Human farmer feeds starving alien empire reaches its dramatic peak when Easton and Princess Ivara confront her treacherous Uncle Corin before the Imperial Council. With living proof of their hybrid crops thriving against his engineered pathogen, they expose his sabotage of the Empire's food supply. As Corin's skin darkens with rage, the Emperor himself orders his detention, forever changing Zephyrian agriculture and cementing Easton and Ivara's victory. The early morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Easton's seed barn, casting long shadows across the weathered wooden floor. He moved with practiced efficiency, sorting through his collection of heirloom seeds, each carefully preserved in glass jars labeled with his grandfather's handwriting. Outside, the fields stretched toward the horizon, a patchwork of diverse crops that defied the industrial monoculture that had once dominated global agriculture. At 42, Easton Reed had the calloused hands and sun-weathered face of a man who had spent his life working the land. His farm stood as a testament to traditional methods in a world that had nearly lost them. After the ecological collapse of the 2030s, humanity had been forced to relearn what generations before had known. That soil was a living thing, that diversity bred resilience, and that technology could never fully replace the intimate knowledge passed down through generations of farmers. Easton carefully examined a jar of rare bean seeds, holding them up to the light. These particular beans had been in his family for over 200 years, surviving wars, famines, and the catastrophic climate shifts of the previous century. Their genetic diversity represented something precious, an unbroken link to agricultural wisdom that predated the Industrial Revolution. Another season, he murmured to himself, feeling the familiar anticipation that came with spring planting. The world outside his remote farm had recovered somewhat from the worst of the ecological disasters. But here, in this quiet corner of what had once been called the American heartland, Easton maintained his sanctuary of agricultural diversity with religious devotion. He was so absorbed in his work that he almost missed the first shimmer of light in the corner of the barn. It started as a faint glow, barely distinguishable from the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. Then it grew, pulsing with an unearthly blue-white luminescence that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Easton backed away, knocking over a bucket of soil samples as the light expanded into a perfect circle about 7 feet in diameter. The air crackled with static electricity, and a scent like ozone filled the barn. He reached for the nearest tool, a pitchfork, though what good it would do against whatever was happening, he couldn't say. The circle of light stabilized, its edges shimmering like the surface of water. Then, a figure stepped through. She, for it was clearly female despite her alien appearance, stood nearly 7 feet tall with luminescent skin that shifted between pale blue and violet. Her features were humanoid, but refined to an almost crystalline perfection. High cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes that glowed with an inner light, and a cascade of hair that seemed to contain the colors of a nebula. Her clothing resembled liquid metal, flowing around her form, yet maintaining its shape. But what struck Easton most was the expression on her face. Desperation. "Are you the seed keeper?" she asked, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate with the dust particles in the air. Easton gripped his pitchfork tighter. "Who's asking?" The alien woman straightened, and despite her obvious distress, a regal bearing asserted itself. "I am Princess Ivara of the Zephyrian Empire, 7th daughter of Emperor Talon, and heir to the agricultural ministry." She gestured at the jars of seeds surrounding them. "I have traveled 17 light years because our empire is starving, and our intelligence suggests that you, or someone like you, might possess the knowledge to save billions of lives." Easton lowered his pitchfork slightly, but maintained his distance. "How did you find me? How did you even get here?" "Quantum entanglement portals," she said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "As for finding you, We've been monitoring Earth's recovery since your ecological collapse. We detected unusual biodiversity signatures from this region. You maintain crop diversity levels that exceed any other location on your planet by a factor of 20. Easton set the pitchfork aside but remained wary. So, an advanced alien civilization is coming to a primitive Earth farmer for agricultural advice? Forgive me if that sounds a little hard to believe. Your Highness. Something like shame flickered across Ivara's luminescent features. The Zephyrian Empire embraced technological solutions to food production centuries ago. We engineered perfect crops, eliminated pests, and created artificial growing environments across thousands of worlds. Her voice faltered. But now, our crops are failing system-wide. Our soil is dead. Our engineered plants are succumbing to a pathogen that adapts faster than our scientists can respond. Billions already go hungry, and within 3 of your Earth years, our civilization will collapse. And you think I can help? Easton asked incredulously. We believe Earth's traditional agricultural methods, the ones your society nearly lost, contain wisdom our scientists overlooked. We need. She hesitated, and he could see how difficult the next words were for her. We need to learn from you. Easton ran a hand through his graying hair. This was madness. Yet looking at the alien princess, standing among his precious seed collection, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of validation. For decades, he had preserved these agricultural traditions while the world dismissed them as primitive and inefficient. Now, apparently, an advanced alien civilization was desperate enough to seek them out. I'll need proof, he said finally. Bring me a soil sample from one of your failing agricultural worlds. Princess Ivara nodded and reached into a pouch at her waist. She produced a small, transparent container filled with what looked like fine gray dust. This is from our primary agricultural moon, Zephyra. Once, it produced enough food to feed billions. Easton took the container cautiously. He opened it and poured a small amount into his palm, then lifted it to his nose and inhaled deeply. There was no earthy smell, no hint of the complex bouquet that healthy soil possessed. He rubbed it between his fingers, feeling its lifeless texture. This isn't soil, he said quietly. It's just substrate. There's nothing living in it. Precisely. It's been sterilized to eliminate pathogens and optimized for nutrient delivery. That's how we've farmed for centuries. Easton shook his head in disbelief. Then it's no wonder your crops are failing. Soil isn't just dirt. It's an ecosystem. Billions of microorganisms, fungi, nutrients, all working together. This... He let the gray substance trickle from his hand back into the container. This is dead. For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed Ivara's face. Then you can help us. Easton looked around his barn at the carefully preserved seeds, at the charts tracking crop rotations and soil health, at the compost samples in various stages of decomposition. Everything he had devoted his life to preserving might save an alien civilization from starvation. I can try, he said, but you'll need to tell me everything about these crop failures and what your scientists have already attempted. Ivara nodded eagerly. I've brought extensive data, but there's something else you should know. Her expression grew serious. I came here without the knowledge of the Imperial Council. If certain factions discovered I was seeking help from a less advanced world, they would see it as a sign of weakness. There are those who would rather see billions starve than admit our perfect system has failed. Political problems exist everywhere, I see, Easton remarked dryly. Indeed. My uncle, Corin, leads the faction that developed our current agricultural system. He has much to lose if we change course. She straightened, her full height impressive in the confines of the barn. I must return soon before my absence is discovered, but I can come back tomorrow with more information. Will you help us, Seedkeeper? Easton considered the request. Every instinct told him to refuse, to send this alien princess back where she came from and continue his solitary work. But the farmer in him, the part that understood that growing food was not just a profession, but a sacred duty, couldn't turn away from hungry people, even if they lived among the stars. "My name is Easton," he said, "and yes, I'll help if I can." The relief on Ivara's face was palpable. "Thank you, Easton of Earth. You may have just saved the Zepyrian Empire." She stepped back toward the shimmering portal, which had remained open during their conversation. "I will return at this same time tomorrow. Bring more soil samples," Easton called as she approached the light. "From different worlds if possible, and any seeds that have shown even slight resistance to whatever is killing your crops." Ivara nodded and stepped into the portal. There was a flash of intensified light, and then she was gone, leaving Easton alone in his barn, with the lingering scent of ozone and a container of lifeless alien soil. "Well," he said to the empty room, "that wasn't on today's to-do list." The next morning, Easton woke before dawn, as was his habit. But instead of beginning his usual routine, he went directly to the barn, bringing with him samples of his own soil and a selection of his hardiest seed varieties. If Princess Ivara returned as promised, he wanted to be prepared. He didn't have to wait long. Just as the sun crested the horizon, the air in the corner of the barn began to shimmer. The portal materialized, and Ivara stepped through, this time carrying a large case that seemed to hover slightly above the ground beside her. "You came back," Easton said, surprised despite her promise. "Did you think I wouldn't?" she asked. One eyebrow arched in a surprisingly human expression. "Let's just say I've learned to be cautious when dealing with the unexpected." Ivara nodded. "A wise approach. I've brought what you requested. Soil samples from 12 agricultural worlds and seed specimens from our failing crops." She gestured to the hovering case. "I've also included comprehensive data on our agricultural practices and the progression of the crop failures." Easton approached the case, examining it with curiosity. "How do I—" Ivara touched a panel on its side, and the top became transparent, revealing neatly organized compartments containing various samples and what appeared to be crystalline data storage devices. "I'm not sure how much use those will be," Easton said, pointing to the data crystals. "My computer is pretty basic." Ivara smiled for the first time since they'd met. "The case includes a compatible interface. I anticipated technological discrepancies." Easton nodded, impressed by her foresight. "Let's start with the basics, then. Show me your best and worst agricultural worlds." For the next several hours, they examined the soil samples. Easton performed simple tests, looking at texture, structure, and microbial activity using his modest farm equipment. What he found confirmed his initial suspicions. The Zepyrian Empire had essentially created sterile growing mediums, not living soil. "Your scientists have been thinking about this all wrong," he explained, as he showed Ivara the difference between her samples and a handful of his own rich, dark soil teeming with life. "They've been trying to eliminate variables, to control every aspect of the growing environment. But agriculture isn't about control. It's about cooperation with natural systems." "Our approach has worked for centuries," Ivara pointed out, though without defensiveness. "Until it didn't," Easton countered. "That's the problem with monocultures and over-sterilized environments. They work until they catastrophically don't. One pathogen that can break through your defenses. And suddenly, everything fails at once because there's no diversity, no resilience in the system." He placed both soil samples under his microscope and adjusted it so Ivara could see. "Look at the difference. In my soil, there are thousands of species of bacteria, fungi, nematodes, all working together in balance. In yours, there's nothing alive except this pathogen your scientists can't control." Ivara's eyes widened as she looked through the microscope. "I've never seen soil like yours. It's so Chaotic. That's exactly right, Easton said with a smile. Healthy ecosystems are organized chaos. The complexity is what makes them resilient. They moved on to examining the seed samples. The Ziperian crops were remarkably uniform, each seed of a given variety identical to its siblings down to the cellular level. Perfect genetic consistency, Ibarra explained, with a hint of pride. Each seed is guaranteed to produce exactly the same plant, with precisely the same nutritional profile. And precisely the same vulnerabilities, Easton added. He showed her a jar of his heirloom tomato seeds. Look at these. Even though they're all the same variety, each seed is slightly different. That genetic diversity is their strength. If a disease or pest comes along, maybe it will kill some plants, but others will have natural resistance. Nature works through variation and selection. As the day progressed, Easton explained the principles of sustainable agriculture: crop rotation, companion planting, integrated pest management, and the crucial importance of soil health. Ibarra absorbed everything with remarkable quickness, asking insightful questions that revealed her own deep scientific knowledge, albeit from a very different perspective. Your people advanced so far technologically that you forgot the fundamentals, Easton concluded as the afternoon waned. You've been fighting against natural systems instead of working with them. Ibarra was silent for a long moment, staring at the samples spread before them. My Uncle Corin leads our agricultural ministry. He would say your methods are primitive and inefficient. And how efficient is your current system with crops failing empire-wide? Easton asked gently. Ibarra looked up, and her luminescent eyes seemed to dim slightly. Not all the failures are natural. I didn't tell you everything yesterday. She hesitated. I have reason to believe some of the crop failures have been engineered. Easton frowned. You think someone is deliberately causing the food shortages? I can't prove it, but yes. The pattern of failures doesn't make ecological sense, even accounting for the pathogen. And certain factions within the empire would benefit from a food crisis, particularly those who control alternative food production technologies. Like your uncle? Ibarra nodded gravely. Corin has been pushing for complete agricultural automation and synthetic food production for decades. The current crisis has strengthened his position considerably. Easton leaned back against his workbench. So we're not just fighting crop failure, we're fighting sabotage. Potentially. Which is why I need to be extremely careful about who knows I'm working with you. She straightened, her regal bearing returning. I should go. I've been away too long already. Wait, Easton said. Take these. He handed her several jars of seeds and a container of his soil. Start experimenting with them in a secure location, and bring me samples of the pathogen affecting your crops. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Ibarra accepted the items reverently. I'll return in 3 days. By then, I should have access to the pathogen samples. She paused, then added, Thank you, Easton. You're the first person who's given me hope that we might solve this. After she departed through the portal, Easton sat alone in his barn, turning one of the alien seed samples over in his palm. What had started as an extraordinary encounter now felt like an enormous responsibility. Somewhere across the stars, billions of beings were facing starvation, and somehow, his lifetime of agricultural knowledge might be their salvation. He picked up one of the data crystals Ibarra had left behind and connected it to the interface in the case. Immediately, holographic displays sprang to life, showing him detailed information about Ziperian agriculture, planetary conditions, and crop failure patterns. He would need to study all of it if he was going to help. Just another day on the farm, he muttered to himself as he settled in for a long night of research. Over the next month, a rhythm developed. Ibarra would appear every few days, staying for several hours to work with Easton on developing resistant crop varieties and soil rehabilitation techniques. With each visit, she brought new samples, data, and questions. And with each departure, she took back seeds, soil cultures, and knowledge to implement in secret facilities she had established away from her uncle's surveillance. As they worked together, Easton found himself increasingly impressed by Ivara's intelligence and adaptability. Despite being a princess from an advanced civilization, she wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, literally. She learned to feel soil texture, to identify beneficial insects, to recognize the subtle signs of plant health that couldn't be quantified by instruments. "My mother would be horrified," she laughed one afternoon as she dug her fingers into a compost pile Easton had prepared. "Princesses of the royal blood do not typically immerse themselves in decomposing organic matter." "Your mother sounds like she's missing out," Easton replied with a smile. "There's nothing more miraculous than watching life break down and rebuild itself." Their relationship evolved from cautious collaboration to genuine friendship. Easton found himself looking forward to her visits, not just for the fascinating cross-cultural scientific exchange, but for her company. His life as a solitary farmer had been fulfilling but lonely, and Ivara's presence brought a new energy to his days. For her part, Ivara seemed equally taken with Easton and his world. She marveled at the complexity of Earth's ecosystems, often stopping their work to observe a butterfly or listen to birdsong. Such biodiversity had been engineered out of Zephyrian worlds centuries ago in favor of controlled efficiency. "We have nothing like this," she said one day, as they walked through a meadow adjacent to Easton's farm. Wildflowers bobbed in the breeze, and bees moved industriously from blossom to blossom. "Our worlds are ordered, everything in its place, serving its function." "And beautiful in their own way, I'm sure," Easton offered. Ivara looked distant. "Yes, but with a cold beauty, mathematical. Nothing like this glorious chaos." She reached out to touch a red clover bloom, and a bumblebee rose lazily from it, causing her to step back in surprise. "It won't hurt you," Easton assured her, "unless you threaten it." "On Zephyrian worlds, insects are considered pests to be eliminated," she explained. "I've never been this close to one before." "Another mistake your people made," Easton said. "Without pollinators like these bees, many of our crops wouldn't exist." Their work progressed rapidly. Using Easton's knowledge of traditional breeding techniques combined with Ivara's advanced understanding of genetics, they began developing crop varieties that might resist the mysterious pathogen while thriving in rehabilitated soils. But as their research advanced, so did the danger. During one visit, Ivara arrived through the portal, looking harried, her usual composure shaken. "My uncle's agents are following me," she said without preamble. "I've been careful, but he suspects something. 3 of my research assistants have been detained for questioning." Easton felt a chill. "Are they in danger?" "They don't know about Earth or you. I've been cautious, but Corin is ruthless when he perceives a threat to his authority." She paced the barn, her luminescent skin fluctuating with emotion. "We're making progress, but not quickly enough. The latest projections show food supplies on our outer colonies will be critically depleted within months, not years as we originally thought." Easton considered this. "We need to accelerate our timeline. The breeding program is promising, but traditional methods take generations to stabilize new traits." "Which we don't have," Ivara finished. She stopped pacing and turned to him. "There's something else I should tell you. The pathogen affecting our crops. It's not natural. I've confirmed it was engineered." "By your uncle?" Easton asked, though he already suspected the answer. Ivara nodded grimly. "Almost certainly. The genetic structure contains markers consistent with his research division's work. He's creating the crisis to consolidate power." Easton's jaw tightened. "Then he's responsible for billions of potential deaths." "Yes, and he'll be watching me even more closely now." She moved closer to Easton, her voice dropping. I may not be able to return for some time. I need to establish a more secure operation and protect those helping me." The thought of not seeing Ibarra for an extended period bothered Easton more than he wanted to admit. Over the past month, she had become more than a scientific collaborator. She had become someone he cared for deeply. "What can I do from here?" he asked. "Continue the work. I'll leave you everything you need." She gestured to the case she had brought. "This contains our latest data and more advanced equipment. There's also a secure communication device that can send messages through the quantum link without opening a full portal." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, almost electric. "Be careful, Easton. If Corin discovers your existence, he won't hesitate to eliminate you and everything you know." "I'm just a farmer," he said with a half-smile. "We're pretty hard to eliminate." Ibarra didn't return the smile. "Promise me you'll take precautions. This farm is isolated, but you're still vulnerable." "I promise," he said seriously. "And I'll keep working on resistant varieties. By the time you return, I'll have something that can withstand your uncle's pathogen." She studied his face for a moment, then did something unexpected. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, apparently a significant gesture in her culture. "Thank you, Easton of Earth. My people will never know what they owe to you." After she left, the farm seemed unnaturally quiet. Easton threw himself into the research, using the advanced equipment Ibarra had provided to accelerate his breeding program. The communication device occasionally chimed with encoded messages, brief updates on her situation, or questions about his progress, but nothing that suggested when she might return. 2 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and Easton's experimental fields flourished with test crops developed from Ziperian seed stock, crossbred with Earth varieties. He documented everything meticulously, recording which combinations showed the most promise for both pathogen resistance and soil rehabilitation. He was harvesting data from one such test plot when his neighbor Pete's truck came bouncing down the long driveway to his farmhouse. This was unusual. Pete rarely visited unannounced, respecting Easton's privacy. Pete emerged from his truck, looking worried. A sturdy man in his 60s, with a perpetual farmer's tan and calloused hands. He had been Easton's closest neighbor and friend for decades. "Got some strange fellows asking questions in town," Pete said without preamble. "Men in suits, not local, asking about unusual activities in the area, specifically around your property." Easton felt a knot form in his stomach. "What kind of questions?" "Light phenomena. Strange equipment deliveries. They had satellite photos showing unusual growth patterns in your north field. The experimental one." Pete squinted at him. "Something you want to tell me, Easton?" For a brief moment, Easton considered fabricating an explanation, but Pete deserved better than that. "It's complicated, Pete. And honestly, you might be safer not knowing." Pete crossed his arms. "We've been neighbors for 30 years. If you're in some kind of trouble, I want to help." Easton sighed. "Let's go inside." Over coffee at Easton's kitchen table, he told Pete an abbreviated version of the truth about Ibarra, the crop failures, and the work they'd been doing. He left out the political intrigue and the engineered pathogen, framing it simply as helping an advanced civilization rediscover traditional agricultural wisdom. To his credit, Pete listened without interruption, his weathered face giving away little. When Easton finished, Pete took a long sip of his coffee before responding. "Well," he said finally, "that explains the weird lights folks have been seeing. Thought we had ourselves a UFO situation." "You believe me?" Easton asked, surprised by the calm reception. Pete shrugged. "You're the most no-nonsense man I know, Easton. If you say you're helping space farmers, then that's what you're doing." He leaned forward. "But these men asking questions, they're not from space. They're the kind that carry badges and guns, government types. Or Working for someone who's intercepted Ivara's communications, Easton said, his concern growing. She warned me her uncle would go to extreme lengths to protect his position. Then you need to be careful. If they're monitoring your fields, they might be watching the farm too. Pete stood up. I'll keep my ears open in town. Let you know if they start asking more pointed questions. In the meantime, maybe move your most important work somewhere less obvious. After Pete left, Easton went to the barn and activated the communication device. He sent a brief message to Ivara. Possible security breach. Unknown agents asking questions locally. Advise. The response came hours later, the longest delay since they'd begun communicating. Extreme danger. Corin has Earth coordinates. Destroy all evidence. We'll extract you soon. Easton stared at the message, his heart racing. How had Ivara's uncle found Earth? More importantly, how much time did he have before these agents made their move? Working quickly, he gathered the most critical seed samples and research notes. The advanced equipment would have to be abandoned. It was too large and distinctive to transport. But the seeds, the soil cultures, the data recordings of their work, these were irreplaceable. He had just finished packing these essentials into a weatherproof container when the distant sound of vehicles reached him. Through the barn window, he could see dust rising from his driveway, multiple vehicles approaching fast. There was no time to run. Instead, Easton moved swiftly to a corner of the barn and activated a hidden mechanism. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a narrow staircase leading down to a bunker his grandfather had built during the Cold War. Easton had modified it years ago to store his most precious seed stock in case of another ecological catastrophe. He descended quickly, the container of Zepyrian research clutched to his chest. The hidden door slid closed above him just as he heard vehicles pulling up outside the barn. The bunker was small but well-equipped, with its own ventilation system, a small generator, and enough supplies to last for weeks if necessary. Most importantly, it was shielded. His grandfather had been paranoid about radiation, and the walls were lined with lead. If these agents had technology to detect the alien equipment, the bunker might hide it. Through a small monitoring system that showed feeds from cameras hidden around his property, Easton watched as men in dark suits methodically searched his house and barn. They moved with military precision, scanning everything with handheld devices that emitted soft blue light. Hours passed. The men found the advanced equipment in the barn and carefully packed it away in specialized containers. They downloaded data from his computer. They took soil samples from his experimental fields. But they did not discover the bunker entrance, concealed beneath farming equipment his family had used for generations. Night fell. The men established a perimeter around his farm and settled in, apparently planning to wait for his return. Easton began to wonder if he would be trapped in the bunker indefinitely. Then, shortly after midnight, a familiar shimmer of light appeared in the corner of the bunker. Easton nearly cried out in relief as a portal materialized, and Ivara stepped through. But she was not alone. A tall, dignified Zepyrian male with silver-blue skin accompanied her, his bearing as regal as Ivara's. "Easton," Ivara said urgently, "we have little time. This is Salon, my most trusted advisor. We've come to extract you and everything you've compiled." "Your uncle's men are all over my farm," Easton said. "We know," Salon replied, his voice deeper than Ivara's, but with the same musical quality. "Their presence has actually made our task easier. The energy signatures of their scanning devices masked our portal formation." Ivara approached Easton. Her eyes filled with concern. "I'm so sorry, I tried to be careful. But Corin has resources I underestimated. He's tracked my movements and identified Earth as a point of interest." "What happens now?" Easton asked. "Now," Ivara said with determination. "You come with us to Zepyrian Prime. We've prepared a secure facility where we can continue our work. With what we've already developed, We believe we can create resistant crops and begin soil rehabilitation within months, not years. Easton hesitated. Leave Earth? For how long? Ivara and Salon exchanged glances. The situation has escalated, Salon explained. Princess Ivara has formally accused Lord Corrin of agricultural sabotage before the Imperial Council. A full investigation has been launched. But until it concludes, both of you are in danger. We believe Lord Corrin will attempt to eliminate all evidence, including you. And the men upstairs? Easton asked. Mercenaries, Ivara said grimly. Not official representatives of any Earth government. They've been instructed to retrieve our technology and eliminate anyone with knowledge of it. The gravity of the situation sank in. Easton looked around the bunker at generations of his family's agricultural heritage. I can't just abandon everything. You won't have to, Ivara assured him. Once Corrin is removed from power, you can return. But right now, your knowledge is too valuable to risk. Billions of lives depend on our work. Easton thought of his fields, his home, the life he had built. But he also thought of the sterile soil samples Ivara had shown him, of worlds dying because they had forgotten how to work with nature instead of against it. I'll need to bring my seed bank, he said finally, and send a message to my neighbor Pete so he can look after the farm. Ivara nodded. We can arrange both, but we must hurry. The portal can only remain stable for a short time at this distance. As Easton quickly gathered his most precious seeds and wrote a brief note to Pete, he realized that his life had irrevocably changed the moment Ivara had stepped into his barn. He was no longer just a keeper of Earth's agricultural heritage. He had become a bridge between worlds, between ways of thinking about humanity's relationship with the soil that sustained all life. I'm ready, he said, picking up the container of their research and a satchel of his most precious seeds. Ivara extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Easton took it. Together, they stepped into the portal, leaving behind the only world he had ever known. The transition through the portal was both instantaneous and eternal. Easton experienced a sensation of falling through layers of light. His body simultaneously stretched and compressed. Then, with a suddenness that left him gasping, his feet touched solid ground. They stood in a vast chamber with crystalline walls that seemed to shift colors with the light. The air was slightly thinner than Earth's, but breathable, with a subtle floral scent he couldn't identify. Through enormous windows, he could see a cityscape unlike anything on Earth, soaring structures that appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that shimmered with bioluminescence. Welcome to Zephyrian Prime, Ivara said, still holding his hand. More specifically, to my personal research facility beneath the Imperial Palace. Easton turned slowly, taking in the alien environment. Despite the aesthetic differences, the chamber was clearly a working laboratory, with equipment he recognized as analogous to Earth's scientific instruments, though far more advanced. It's overwhelming, he admitted. You'll adapt quickly, Salon assured him, already moving to a control panel where he began entering data. Humans have proven remarkably adaptable in our simulations. Simulations? Easton raised an eyebrow at Ivara. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. We've studied Earth extensively. Your species' resilience is one reason I believed you might help us, where our own scientists failed. Before Easton could respond, the chamber door dissolved, literally melted away, and 3 Zephyrians entered. They had the same general appearance as Ivara and Salon, though their skin tones varied from deep indigo to pale lavender. They stopped short at the sight of Easton, their luminescent eyes widening. Is this... one began. Yes, this is Easton Reed of Earth, Ivara confirmed. Our agricultural advisor and my personal guest. He is to be given full access to the research facilities and treated with all diplomatic courtesy. The 3 Zephyrians bowed in unison, a fluid motion that reminded Easton of prairie grass bending in the wind. The earth samples are to be taken directly to the secure cultivation chamber, Ivara continued. We'll begin viability testing immediately. She turned to Easton. These are my most trusted research staff. They've been working in secret to prepare for your arrival. What exactly is the plan now that I'm here? Easton asked, still trying to absorb the reality of his situation. First, rest, Ivara said. The portal transition can be taxing for first-time travelers. Then, we'll integrate your seed stock and research with our existing program. Our goal is to develop resistant crop varieties quickly enough to begin distribution to the outer colonies within 1 standard month. And your uncle? Ivara's expression hardened. The Imperial Council has begun its investigation. Corin has considerable influence, but the evidence against him is mounting. His actions against Earth, sending mercenaries to a protected developing world, have particularly troubled the Council. Protected? Easton asked. Your world is classified as a recovering biosphere, Salon explained. Direct interference is forbidden under Imperial law. Yet you interfered, Easton pointed out. I did, Ivara acknowledged. I broke our laws to seek your help. If the Council rules against me, I'll face consequences. But the alternative was watching billions starve, while Corin consolidated power. The gravity of her risk finally registered with Easton. This wasn't just about saving her people. Ivara had put her own position, possibly her life, in jeopardy by reaching out to him. Then we'd better make sure it was worth it, he said firmly. Let's get to work. Over the next several weeks, Easton adjusted to life on Zepyrian Prime. The gravity was slightly lower than Earth's, making him feel strangely buoyant. The day-night cycle was longer, with 30-hour days that disrupted his circadian rhythm until Ivara had the lighting in his quarters adjusted to simulate Earth patterns. The food was the biggest challenge. Zepyrian cuisine was based on nutrient profiles rather than flavor, resulting in meals that were perfectly balanced but utterly bland to Easton's palate. After a week of stoically consuming the colorless nutrition cubes provided, he finally requested access to a growing space where he could cultivate some earth herbs and vegetables. You wish to consume plants directly? One of the staff asked in confusion. Without nutrient extraction and purification. Exactly, Easton confirmed. Trust me, your people have been missing out. Ivara approved his request. And soon Easton had a small garden, growing earth crops in Zepyrian soil that he had personally amended with organic matter and microbial cultures. The staff watched in fascination as he harvested basil, tomatoes, and peppers, using them to transform his bland nutrition cubes into something approximating a decent meal. But the majority of their time was devoted to the critical work of developing resistant crops. The research facility provided advantages Easton could never have dreamed of on his farm. Genetic sequencing that took minutes instead of days. Growth chambers that could simulate any planetary environment in the Empire. And diagnostic tools that could track a plant's metabolic processes in real time. With these resources, and Easton's knowledge of traditional breeding methods, they made rapid progress. By combining the genetic diversity of Earth's heirloom varieties with the environmental adaptability of Zepyrian crops, they created hybrid plants that could resist Corin's engineered pathogen while thriving in rehabilitated soil. It's working, Ivara said one day, her voice filled with quiet wonder as they observed a test field of hybrid wheat growing in formerly dead soil. The plants stood tall and healthy, their golden heads heavy with grain despite being exposed to concentrated doses of the pathogen. Of course it's working, Easton replied. It's what plants have been doing for millions of years, adapting, evolving, finding ways to survive. We just helped them remember how. Ivara studied him, with an expression he couldn't quite read. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened beyond professional collaboration. They worked seamlessly together, anticipating each other's needs and building on each other's ideas. In quiet moments, They shared stories of their vastly different worlds. Easton, speaking of Earth's seasons and wildlife. Ivara describing the 1,000 moons of the Zephyrian system and the crystal forests of her childhood home. Sometimes, Easton caught her watching him with that same, unreadable expression, a mixture of curiosity and something more personal. He found himself increasingly drawn to her, her intelligence, her courage in defying convention to save her people. And yes, her alien beauty that had somehow become familiar and captivating to him. But always, the political situation loomed over their work. Corrin's influence in the Imperial Council remained strong, and the investigation into his activities proceeded with frustrating slowness. Meanwhile, reports from the outer colonies grew increasingly dire, with food riots breaking out on several worlds. Then, exactly 1 month after Easton's arrival on Zephyrian Prime, everything changed. He was working late in the main laboratory when the facility's alarms activated. A pulsing blue light accompanied by a sound like distant chimes. Salon burst into the lab, his normally composed demeanor shattered. "We've been compromised. Lord Corrin's forces are attempting to breach the facility's defenses." "Where's Ivara?" Easton demanded. "In the secure communications chamber, appealing directly to the Emperor. But we must evacuate you immediately. You are the primary target." "I'm not leaving without our research and seed stock," Easton insisted. Salon nodded curtly. "Already being transferred to a secondary location. But we must—" The door dissolved, but instead of staff members, armed Zephyrians in sleek armor entered. Their weapons, long crystalline rods that hummed with energy, were pointed directly at Easton and Salon. "By order of Lord Corrin, Chief Agricultural Minister, this facility is now under Imperial control," announced their leader, a harsh-faced Zephyrian with deep blue skin. "The Earth specimen is to be detained for questioning regarding illegal interference in Imperial agriculture." Salon stepped in front of Easton. "This is a royal research facility under Princess Ivara's direct authority. You have no jurisdiction here. The princess's authority has been temporarily suspended, pending investigation of treason charges." The leader replied coldly. "Stand aside, Advisor Salon, or you will be detained as well." Salon didn't move. "You'll have to force me." The leader raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the lights in the laboratory flickered and died. In the momentary darkness, Easton felt a hand grasp his arm and pull him toward a section of wall that had silently opened. "This way," Ivara's voice whispered in his ear. "Quickly!" They slipped through the opening just as emergency lighting activated in the main lab. Behind them, Easton could hear shouts and the strange humming discharge of Zephyrian weapons. "Salon," he began. "Is creating a diversion," Ivara said grimly, as she led him through a narrow corridor. "He knew this might happen. We have contingencies." They moved swiftly through a series of passages that Easton had never seen before. Apparently, a secret network within the palace complex. Ivara moved with confidence, occasionally placing her hand on seemingly blank walls to open hidden doorways. "Where are we going?" Easton asked as they paused at an intersection. "To the Emperor, my father," Ivara replied. "Corrin has moved against us sooner than anticipated, but he's made a critical mistake. By attacking a royal research facility, he's committed an act that even his supporters on the council cannot easily dismiss. But the charges against you are fabricated, and my father knows it. The question is whether he has the political strength to oppose Corrin openly." She took Easton's hand. "Our work is the evidence that will vindicate me and condemn my uncle. The resistant crops, the rehabilitated soil, they prove both that his agricultural system has failed and that he engineered the crisis. Then we need to make sure that evidence reaches your father," Easton said. Ivara nodded and led him onward. They eventually emerged into a vast garden unlike anything Easton had seen on Zephyrian Prime. Unlike the sterile, mathematically precise landscapes that dominated the city, this garden was wild, organic, with plants growing in seemingly natural patterns. It reminded him, with a pang of homesickness, of Earth. The Imperial Sanctuary, Ivara explained, as they moved carefully through the foliage. The only place on the capital world where plants from across the Empire grow without technological intervention. My father created it centuries ago, against Corin's objections. Your father doesn't share your uncle's views on agriculture? My father is traditional in many ways. He values the old knowledge, but he has delegated agricultural policy to Corin for generations. Until now, he had no reason to question the results. They approached a structure that appeared to be grown from living trees, their branches intertwined to form walls and a roof. 2 guards stood at its entrance, but rather than challenging them, they bowed deeply at Ivara's approach. The Emperor awaits, Your Highness, one said. He instructed that you and your Earth advisor be admitted immediately. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the scent of growing things. At the center of the single room stood a Zephyrian male who could only be the Emperor, taller than any Easton had seen, with skin that shimmered with all the colors of his species combined. His eyes, unlike the luminescent glow of other Zephyrians, were deep and dark, like pools of ancient wisdom. Father, Ivara said, bowing deeply. Easton followed her example. My daughter. The Emperor's voice resonated through the chamber. And Easton Reed of Earth. I have heard much about you. Human farmer. Your Majesty, Easton acknowledged, uncertain of the proper protocol. There is little time, the Emperor continued. Corin moves his forces throughout the palace complex. He claims you, he nodded to Easton, have introduced a biological contaminant that threatens our agricultural systems. That's a lie, Ivara said heatedly. Uncle Corin is the one who engineered the pathogen killing our crops. Easton has helped us develop varieties that can resist it and thrive in living soil. So you have said in your communications. But the Council requires proof, and Corin controls the evidence from your laboratory. Not all of it, Easton interjected. Both royals looked at him in surprise. The plants themselves are the evidence. Ivara and I sent seed samples to agricultural stations on 12 outer colonies before Corin made his move. Those plants are already growing, already demonstrating resistance. Is this true? The Emperor asked his daughter. Ivara nodded. We anticipated Corin might try to destroy our work. The colonial agricultural directors report directly to the Council, not to the Agricultural Ministry. By now, they will have documented the success of our hybrids compared to the failing standard crops. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he said, I have ruled the Zephyrian Empire for over 7 centuries. In that time, I have seen technologies rise and fall, policies succeed and fail. But I have never seen my people face starvation on this scale. He turned to Easton. Tell me, Earth Farmer, what is the fundamental flaw in our approach? Easton considered his words carefully. Your Majesty, the Zephyrian Empire sought to control nature completely, to eliminate variables, to create perfect uniformity. But life doesn't work that way. Life thrives on diversity, on adaptation, on the organized chaos of natural systems working together. By sterilizing your soils and engineering genetically identical crops, you created a system that was efficient, but ultimately fragile. And your solution? Reintroduce diversity. Rehabilitate your soils with living microorganisms. Use crop rotation and companion planting to break disease cycles naturally. Work with the fundamental principles that have sustained agriculture on Earth for 10,000 years. The Emperor nodded slowly. Simple wisdom, yet profound. He turned to Ivara. You were right to seek help from Earth, daughter, though your methods were unorthodox. Thank you, Father, Ivara said, relief evident in her voice. However, the Emperor continued, the political situation remains complex. Corin has many supporters in the council, and the transition to these new agricultural methods will not be immediate. The Empire still faces food shortages in the short term. We've thought of that too, Easton said. The hybrid varieties we've developed grow faster than standard Zephyrian crops. With proper distribution and planting, the first harvests could begin within 60 days on most colonies. The Emperor's expression remained grave. Corin will not surrender his power willingly. He will claim these hybrids present unknown risks, that proper testing protocols have been ignored. Then, let him present his evidence before the full council, Ivarra said firmly. Let him explain why his perfect agricultural system is failing across the Empire while our hybrids thrive. Let him explain the genetic markers in the pathogen that match his research division's work. A subtle change came over the Emperor's demeanor, a hardening of his expression, a new resolve in his bearing. Yes, it is time for truth to be spoken openly. He touched a panel on his wrist, and a holographic display appeared in the air before him. I am calling an emergency session of the Imperial Council. All members will attend, including Corin. You will present your findings, Ivarra, with your Earth advisor to support your claims. Corin will try to prevent us from reaching the council chamber, Ivarra warned. He will fail, the Emperor stated with quiet authority. I have ruled the Zephyrian Empire since before Corin was born. He forgets that while I have delegated much authority, I have surrendered none. The emergency council session was convened within hours. Easton, walking beside Ivarra through the grand corridors of the Imperial Palace, felt distinctly out of place among the Zephyrian nobility, with their luminescent skin and flowing garments that seemed to defy gravity. Yet the gravity of their mission gave him confidence. They carried with them not just scientific findings, but the future of an empire. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater, with concentric rings of crystalline platforms rising toward the ceiling. The Emperor sat at the lowest level, at the center, with council members arranged by rank and influence on the platforms above. Corin occupied a prominent position near the Emperor. His indigo skin darkened with what Easton assumed was anger or stress. When Ivarra and Easton entered, a murmur rippled through the assembly. Many council members had never seen a human before, and Easton could feel hundreds of luminescent eyes examining him with curiosity or suspicion. The council recognizes Princess Ivarra, Minister of Agricultural Renewal, the Emperor announced, using a title Easton had never heard before. Ivarra stepped forward, her bearing regal despite the pressure of the moment. Honored Council, I come before you with evidence of both crisis and solution. For too long, we have been told that our agricultural systems are perfect, that crop failures are anomalies to be addressed with more control, more uniformity, more of the same policies that have brought us to the brink of starvation. She gestured to Easton. This is Easton Reed of Earth, a keeper of agricultural knowledge that our civilization abandoned centuries ago. With his help, we have discovered the true cause of our crop failures and developed varieties that can restore food security to the Empire. Corin rose from his platform, his voice sharp. The princess has violated quarantine protocols by bringing this alien to our homeworld. Whatever knowledge he possesses is primitive compared to imperial science. I demand he be removed and placed in isolation before he contaminates our agricultural systems further. Lord Corin speaks of contamination, Ivarra countered, her voice steady. Let us discuss contamination. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with a magnified image of the pathogen affecting Zephyrian crops. This organism is responsible for crop failures on 37 major agricultural worlds. Our scientists have been unable to eliminate it, despite 3 years of focused research. The display shifted, highlighting specific sections of the pathogen's genetic structure. These markers are not natural mutations. They are engineered sequences. Specifically, they bear the distinct signature of research conducted under Lord Corin's direct supervision at the Agricultural Ministry's Bioengineering Division. A collective gasp went through the council. Corin's skin darkened further, but he maintained his composure. These allegations are preposterous. The princess has manipulated this data to discredit me because I opposed her unorthodox methods. The evidence has been verified by imperial geneticists, not affiliated with either party, the emperor stated. The genetic markers match those in Lord Corin's research archives with 99.7% certainty. Furthermore, Ivara continued, the pattern of crop failures follows the exact distribution schedule of enhanced growth supplements developed and distributed by Lord Corin's ministry over the past 5 years. These supplements were the vector for introducing the pathogen throughout our agricultural systems. Corin's platform descended to the main floor, bringing him face to face with Ivara and Easton. Even if these accusations were true, which I categorically deny, the fact remains that your solution involves abandoning centuries of imperial agricultural advancement in favor of primitive methods from a backwater world. The cure is worse than the disease. Is survival primitive, Lord Corin? Easton asked, speaking for the first time. The council members leaned forward, many hearing a human voice for the first time. Is diversity primitive? Is working with natural systems instead of constantly fighting against them primitive? If so, then perhaps the Zepyrian Empire needs a dose of primitivity. Before Corin could respond, Ivara activated another holographic display. This one showed split-screen images from agricultural stations on multiple colonies. On one side were the standard Zepyrian crops, withering and diseased. On the other were fields of the hybrid varieties Easton and Ivara had developed, robust, healthy, and heavy with grain despite being deliberately exposed to the pathogen. These images are being transmitted live from 12 agricultural worlds, Ivara explained. The colonial directors can confirm that no special treatments were given to our hybrid varieties. They were planted in the same soil, under the same conditions as the standard crops. The only difference is that our varieties incorporate genetic diversity and are designed to work with rehabilitated, living soil rather than sterile growing medium. The council chamber filled with murmurs as the members observed the stark contrast between the failing crops and the thriving hybrids. Preliminary harvest projections indicate our varieties will yield 300% more than the surviving standard crops, Ivara continued. With immediate implementation of our planting and soil rehabilitation program, we can begin to address food shortages within 60 days on most affected worlds. An elderly council member from an upper tier spoke. These results are impressive, Princess. But Lord Corin raises a valid concern about abandoning our established agricultural systems. The transition you propose would require massive retraining and restructuring. The transition has already begun, Ivara replied. The colonial agricultural directors recognized the emergency and implemented our protocols as soon as they saw the initial results. What we require now is official council sanction to expand the program empire-wide. And what of Lord Corin's alleged involvement in the crop failures? Another council member asked. These are serious accusations. The emperor rose, and the chamber fell silent. Evidence of deliberate sabotage of imperial food supplies constitutes treason of the highest order. Lord Corin will be detained while a full investigation is conducted. He gestured, and imperial guards moved to surround Corin. This is absurd, Corin protested. You cannot possibly believe that I would endanger our people based on fabricated evidence and the word of an alien primitive. The evidence speaks for itself, the emperor replied coldly. The council will review all data and testimony. Until then, you are relieved of your duties as agricultural minister. He turned to the assembled council. I propose that Princess Ivara be confirmed as Minister of Agricultural Renewal, with authority to implement her hybrid crop program throughout the empire. The vote was not unanimous. Corin had allies who abstained, But the overwhelming majority of the council supported the emperor's proposal. With that vote, the course of Zephyrian agriculture fundamentally changed. As the council session concluded and Corin was led away, Ivara turned to Easton, her luminescent eyes bright with emotion. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it." "Your people still face challenges," Easton cautioned. "Rehabilitating dead soil across thousands of worlds will take time. Retraining agricultural workers, establishing seed banks for genetic diversity, implementing crop rotation systems, it's a massive undertaking." "Which is why we need you," Ivara said, taking his hands in hers. "The Emperor has approved the establishment of an Institute of Symbiotic Agriculture, with you as chief advisor. Your knowledge is still vital to our success." Easton felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what they had accomplished together. Satisfaction at seeing traditional agricultural wisdom validated on such a grand scale. But also a pang of homesickness for Earth, for his farm, for the simple life he had left behind. "What about my home?" he asked. "My seeds, my land?" Ivara's expression softened. "The mercenaries were recalled when Corin was detained. Your neighbor, Pete, has been caring for your farm, as you requested. You can return whenever you wish." She paused, then added more softly, "Though I hope you might stay, at least until our work is more established." The unspoken question hung between them. Was there something more than professional collaboration keeping him on Zephyrian Prime? The answer, Easton realized, was yes. Somewhere amid the soil samples and seed hybrids, amid crisis and discovery, his feelings for Ivara had grown into something he hadn't anticipated. "I'll stay," he said. "For now. There's still so much work to do." The relief in her eyes told him she understood what he wasn't saying. There would be time to explore the personal aspects of their relationship. For now, they had an empire to feed. In the months that followed, the Zephyrian Empire underwent a remarkable transformation. The Institute of Symbiotic Agriculture, under Ivara's leadership and Easton's guidance, developed training programs for agricultural workers throughout the empire. Soil rehabilitation techniques spread from world to world, as did the hybrid crop varieties that continued to demonstrate impressive resilience and yield. Corin's trial revealed the full extent of his crimes. He had indeed engineered the pathogen and introduced it gradually through his enhanced supplements, creating a crisis that he believed would cement his power and justify his push for fully synthetic food production. A system that would have made the empire entirely dependent on technology that only he controlled. The evidence was overwhelming, and the council's judgment was severe. Corin was stripped of his titles and exiled to a remote mining colony, never again to hold a position of influence within the empire. As for Easton, he divided his time between Zephyrian Prime and Earth. The portal technology that had once seemed so miraculous to him became routine, allowing him to oversee the Institute's work while still maintaining his farm and seed bank on Earth. Pete, true to his word, had kept everything running smoothly during his absences, though he still shook his head in amazement whenever Easton emerged from the barn after a trip to space. "Never thought I'd see the day when Reed Farms was feeding planets I can't even see in the night sky," he remarked once. "Your grandfather would have been proud. Stubborn old man was right all along about keeping those heirloom seeds." Easton's relationship with Ivara deepened as they worked together to implement their agricultural revolution. The cultural and biological differences between them presented challenges, but they found them far less insurmountable than either might have expected. Their shared passion for preserving agricultural wisdom and their mutual respect provided a foundation that transcended their different origins. On the one-year anniversary of Easton's arrival on Zephyrian Prime, the Emperor hosted a celebration at the Imperial Palace. Agricultural directors from across the empire attended, bringing samples of their first full harvests using the new methods. The results exceeded even Ivara's optimistic projections, Crop yields had increased by an average of 340%, and preliminary soil analyses showed dramatic improvements in microbial diversity and nutrient cycling. During the celebration, Easton found himself standing with Ivara in the imperial sanctuary, the garden that had reminded him so much of Earth when he first saw it. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, gesturing to the seemingly wild arrangement of plants around them. "How did this garden survive when the rest of your agricultural system became so sterile and controlled?" Ivara smiled. "My father created it over 7 centuries ago, after visiting a world much like Earth, one of the few planets where the old ways were still practiced. He was fascinated by what he saw there and brought back seeds and soil to create this sanctuary. Corin always dismissed it as a royal eccentricity. But now I wonder if my father understood something fundamental that the rest of us had forgotten." "That nature is a better designer than we'll ever be," Easton suggested. "Exactly." She took his hand, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the garden's evening light. "The Institute is expanding to 50 new worlds next month. We're establishing seed banks throughout the Empire to ensure genetic diversity is never lost again. Agricultural students from 100 worlds are applying for training. Everything we hoped for is happening. And faster than we anticipated," Easton agreed. "Your people learn quickly." "We had forgotten, not lost the capacity to understand," Ivara corrected gently. "Sometimes, civilizations need to be reminded of fundamental truths." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following a winding path through flowering plants from across the Empire. Finally, Ivara stopped beside a small pool, reflecting the light of Zepyrian Prime's 3 moons. "The Emperor has asked me to formalize our relationship," she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "For diplomatic purposes, he says, but I think he simply approves of you." Easton raised an eyebrow. "Formalize. An interspecies union would be unprecedented, but not forbidden. As agricultural minister, I have considerable latitude in personal matters, and as the Emperor's daughter—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Easton found himself smiling. For all her royal bearing and scientific brilliance, Ivara could still be endearingly awkward about personal matters. "Are you proposing to me, Princess?" Her skin flushed a deeper violet. "I'm suggesting that such an arrangement would have both personal and political advantages. The symbolic union of Earth agricultural wisdom and Zepyrian technology could inspire further cooperation." "Very practical," Easton teased. Then, more seriously, he added, "But is that what you want, Ivara? Not for the Empire or the agricultural program, but for yourself?" Her luminescent eyes met his. "Yes," she said simply. "It is what I want. You have changed not just our empire but me. I cannot imagine continuing this work, or my life, without you beside me." Easton took both her hands in his. "Then my answer is yes. Though I warn you, Earth weddings traditionally involve large quantities of food grown by the couple themselves. We might need to plant a special garden." Ivara laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in the quiet garden. "I believe that can be arranged. We are, after all, in the business of growing things." As they sealed their agreement in the traditional Zepyrian manner, foreheads touching, hands clasped between them, Easton reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From a solitary farmer preserving his family's agricultural heritage, to the architect of an empire-wide return to sustainable farming practices. From a man who had never imagined life beyond Earth, to one who now moved between worlds with ease. And through it all, the fundamental truth that had guided his work remained unchanged: that life thrived on diversity, on adaptation, on the balanced chaos of natural systems working in harmony. It was a truth as applicable to civilizations and relationships as it was to agriculture, a truth that the Zepyrian Empire was now relearning, one field, one planet at a time. Under the triple moons of Zephyrian Prime, in a garden that bridged two worlds, Easton and Ivara began planning not just their union, but the next phase of their agricultural revolution. The seeds they had planted together, both literally and figuratively, would continue to grow, feeding billions and preserving the ancient wisdom of working with the soil rather than against it. It was, Easton thought, an abundant harvest indeed.